Recently, the City of Barrie approved a new budget, which Ward 4 Councillor Amy Courser criticized for being pushed through using strong mayor powers. She cited a lack of opportunity for discussion in the process. The city allocated more than $70 million to the police service, which is nearly a quarter of city's budget. On the other hand, the provincial government announced that they would be putting more than $75 million towards safer parks, while $1 billion on a new police college. To unpack this news, we spoke with Sarah Tilley, harm reduction manager at the Gilbert Centre, and community leader Michael Speers. The discussion focused on the provincial and city policies, including police fundings and funding for social services. Following is the panel discussion.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Tilley. I use they, them pronouns. I am the harm reduction program manager at the Gilbert Centre. And I also do a lot of stuff with the community just around housing, homelessness, and other justice initiatives.
Yeah, I'm Michael Speers. I'm a local community activist, involved in a lot of same things that Sarah is involved in, and I'm also on the provincial executive of the Communist Party of Canada.
Awesome. So just I want to get started with the budget. Barrie city's budget. There are three main components when it comes to the service partners. Barrie Police, Simcoe County, and Public Library. So Barrie Police has requested $72 million budget for 2025, which is 7% increase from the previous year. And I remember when this council's first year in 2022, I believe. So I think it was for 2023 budget, same amount of around 7% increase was asked. And at that time, councillors raised a lot of questions saying, this is a lot of increase. And, at that time, it was more like, this is a one-time thing because we are coming from, a lot of underfunded police, that was mainly directed towards previous council, which was led by Chief Lehman. So that was the tone when the first budget was presented. But this time, the 7% increase in budget did not receive any opposition. Rather, there was indications that this budget city is growing and this budget is not too much. That was from the police side. Then Simcoe County requested more than $32 million, which is 3% increase. And Simcoe County provides various services with Ontario Work, Children's Services, Community Services, Paramedic Services, long-term care. And then there's a Barrie Public Library, which requested around 4% increase. Total budget is around $10 million. Barrie Public Library is other than three existing branches, they are planning to have another branch in the northwest part of the city. So that some of the funds were earmarked for that expansion as well. So in terms of first impression, I would like to start with Michael. What were your first impression when it come to you heard about the budget, and what do you think about it?
I think it's a typical budget from a mayor like Alex Nuttall, and he's obviously he's embraced this whole idea of the strong mayor. I think he wears his strong mayor powers as a badge of honor, and he pushes it as much as he can. So he crafted a budget that was very bare bones. Obviously, with the exception of the police budget, obviously, the mayor is a strong supporter of increasing frontline policing. He's made that very clear to everybody. He wants more policing. He wants his idea of public safety is having more police downtown. Giving people down there a hard time, cracking down on people living rough downtown, cracking down on people that they think might be loitering or acting as vagrants. So that's his idea of community safety, and this budget kind of exemplifies that. We're seeing, we see a few $1 million more for the police. Even though, as I said in my deputation, that there's no evidence that, giving more money to the police actually makes community safer. And there's no evidence that it actually leads to a reduction in crime. But this is what guys like Nuttall believe in. So, lots of money for the police, fewer dollars or very, very, very few dollars for investments in services that people need, shelter spaces, transit, the library, food programs, any type of mental health supports. Very little of that, and it kind of goes with exactly what Nuttall's vision of what Barrie is.
So before moving to Sarah, just Michael, in terms of you have been very active, giving deputations and other community role in the city, and you have been giving deputations for a number of years. So what is your impression in terms of budget under previous mayor Jeff Lehman, whether it comes to police or other budgets, and what is your impression now under Mayor Alex Nuttall?
Well, I would say, I was never a big fan of Jeff Lehman either. I think he kind of he led the city maybe in a bit more traditional and professional manner. But then again, like the previous council, they also gave they also gave lots of money to the police. Basically, whatever they asked for, they would give it to them. They did, they didn't fund transit properly. They didn't fund, or they didn't support or promote an increase in shelter spaces. They didn't really fight the county to get them to, to provide more dollars to the city. And as well, I think, the previous council and this council, they mirror pretty much a lot of municipalities in Ontario, in the fact that they complain about not having the money to to deal with some societal or some social issues that pop up, but there's no fight in them to demand a change from either the province or the federal government in terms of funding allocation, or the ability of a city like Barrie to raise the necessary resources to take care of its citizenry. I look at the fact that Barrie has to go to the county of Simcoe to get money for the social services is so backwards. We've needed the previous councils, and we need this current council to go to the to the province and say, we need to relook at this. We need to separate Barrie from the county when it comes to that, so that Barrie would get its money and be able to deal with the problems that they have to deal with. So and I'm sometimes sympathetic to the city and council and what they have to work with, but they need to really hold the next provincial government responsible, and really start fighting for the city in terms of how how council and how the city can properly raise the revenues needed, to actually respond to the crises that we're seeing in our city.
Yeah, thank you. So Sarah, what is, as a harm production manager, and as a person who has been working closely with the vulnerable population, so what is your impression spending when it comes to the police, Simcoe County, which takes care of a lot of social services, and the Barrie Public Library, which the council also acknowledged, during yesterday's meeting, that it has emerged as kind of a hub for for community members to gather.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would echo a lot of what Michael has said, especially around we know that policing does not create safer communities. Police have a role in our communities in terms of responding to crime that's happened, but it doesn't necessarily and shouldn't necessarily have a role when it comes to the prevention of crime. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, especially as homelessness is drastically going up, like province-wide, but we're also especially seeing a lot more public homelessness in Barrie. There is a real desire from community to want to do something to address the issues. Whatever their motivation for that may be, most people do want to address the issues and don't want people to be experiencing homelessness. However, there's this kind of myth that by cracking down on or becoming harder on homelessness, that will, whip people into shape, and somehow that will change their experiences or their circumstances so that they can have homes. When in reality, what we need to end homelessness is housing services. Like, we need to be addressing the reasons that people are experiencing homelessness. And those are vast. And I think that there is a tendency, especially among current council, or there seems to be a tendency to throw money at quick fixes like the policing. When in reality, that's not what's going to get us there. So I wish we had seen more funding going to the county, as the county is, as Michael was saying, the holder when it comes to the funds for addressing homelessness. That includes warming shelters, that includes drop-in centers, that includes low-income housing, that includes pretty much every aspect of housing and homelessness when it comes to our social safety nets. That unfortunately, if the funding is going to the policing, which is to respond after issues have already happened, then we're not actually addressing any of the root causes to keep people from homelessness, and to support people who are maybe newly experiencing homelessness or to get off of the streets, let alone a variety of other social issues that are directly coming from the economic system that we're currently finding ourselves in, right? So I wish that we had seen more money being committed to the county, and more money being committed to the library. One of the things that we see in especially urban settings, but in most places with libraries, is that they are a social hub for people. They are a space where people can access things like the internet and resources. They can access entertainment so that people have things to do that keep them busy and engaged, connected to their community, community groups, those kinds of things. Libraries are such central hubs for social good. And also, especially as we're seeing, and we've seen over the last few years, when we don't have adequate warming centers and when we don't have adequate shelters, and although we're moving out of isolation and we're opening up businesses, there's still a lot of services and spaces that are not available for people, especially in these cold winter months, for people to access food and warmth and even just a place to exist that isn't outside in a public park. Libraries become those de facto centers for people, and they need the resources to be able to support people who are accessing those services. There are so many things that people go to libraries for, and I think it's really unfortunate that we're not putting more money into both libraries and social services so that we can address and create safe and healthy communities, rather than just trying to respond to communities that aren't doing well.
Yeah, so you touched upon a lot of points, but one I want to talk more about, the Michael mentioned about the policing being given money in general, in that we see a lot. So the just the Peel police, right? The police recently they just this budget they asked for around $140 million more, which was 23% increase in their budget. And Peel region has Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. Caledon is very so when they asked the budget, the Mississauga mayor, I believe she resigned from the police board so she can oppose the budget. But ultimately it was passed, mainly from the support from Patrick Brown, who is the mayor of Brampton, and he supported the budget. So how do you see that trend? If you are aware about not only in Barrie, but other parts in Ontario, Canada, and North America.
Well, I think unfortunately, after the murder of George Floyd, when people, took to the streets to express their outrage over police violence, there seemed to be a willingness from councils to at least kind of listen to people in their concerns about policing. And I think a lot of that was out of fears that, I think a lot of councils kind of said, okay, we'll consider, maybe looking at smaller budget increases. We're not going to look at cuts, obviously, but maybe we'll consider that. A lot of that just might have been a reaction, almost like a public relations exercise on their behalf. I'm not sure how genuine it was. Now it's been a few years. I think unfortunately councils are starting to kind of think that maybe it's time now to kind of revert to the way things were done in the past and start giving the police even more money. And like Sarah said, it's a lot of quick fixes and short-term thinking that these councillors are kind of favoring. So they see about getting tough on crime is an easy slogan, and it's still very popular with a lot of people, a large segment of the population. You say you're a politician, you're saying you're going to get tough on crime. A lot of people are like, okay, I can get behind that. That's great. No one likes crime. So if someone's going to get tough on it, then that's fine. And and giving money to the police is the easiest way for a politician to say that they're going to do that. So my fear is that that kind of thinking is starting to creep back into kind of the political consciousness of these councillors, and that we may start to see higher police budgets, bigger percentage increases every year. The police are going to get emboldened by that kind of thinking. And even just today, like second day of the provincial campaign, Doug Ford was down in London talking to a bunch of police chiefs, and he said he was going to build them a new $1 billion police college to get even more officers trained and out on the street. So, when you have the premier who's running for another mandate that he hopes is the strongest in Ontario history, talking about giving $1 billion for a police college, when $1 billion can go a long way in actually fixing our education system, fixing our healthcare system, all that stuff. When you have him talking about that, and you have the mayor of Barrie publicly endorsing his campaign, the fear is, we're going to see, we already have police services boards that are stacked with conservatives. The province does that. The province has the power to appoint these people, and Doug Ford's appointed a bunch of his friends and supporters and we see that in Barrie. The Barrie Police Services Board is very conservative. I don't think there's a single non-conservative person on that board. And so, it would be nice if we had a change in leadership on the board to actually start considering different models, and to actually start looking more long-term, and looking at solutions that will actually prevent crime in our city and make it safer. But unfortunately, we're not there now, and we just have to keep fighting to make sure that that these politicians and these councils kind of don't feel that they have kind of just like a blank check where they can just basically give the police, whatever they want.
Yeah, and Sarah, yeah, you also, touched upon various points, why it's just, so easy just to give more money to the police. So as a, as a person who works on the ground with vulnerable people, how do you see, money going into other services? How do you see the immediate impact that can have in the society, among, homelessness, and security of people in general, not only those, are homeless.
Yeah, I mean, I think and that's where it gets tricky, right? Sometimes it's really hard to see the immediate impacts. And also what services are available to us. So at a provincial level, when it comes to especially people who use drugs and the safety of communities in which people are using drugs, there has been a very clear message that places like supervised consumption sites are not, they're not welcome. And there's an active attempt to remove most, if not all, of the supervised consumption sites in in Ontario, and to force treatment and things like that. I think, though, what we can see throughout Ontario, Canada, and other parts of the world that have services like that and invest money into those, and those are, I will say, they're the first line of defense. They're the first step. They're not the solution. They're part of a much larger solution. But one of the things that we see when we invest money into places like that is we see a reduction in drug use that is public and on the street. We see a reduction in crime rates of petty crime in places where people are experiencing homelessness and people are using drugs, because when people have safer places to use drugs, whether or not we agree with the choices or why people are using drugs, if people have safer spaces to use drugs, then they're not they're not doing it in places where kids are playing in the park. They're not doing it in front of businesses, right? When people are experiencing homelessness, especially in the winters that we have in Ontario, in the with the lake effects, we get a lot of snow. And so if you're sleeping outside, you are going to be trying to look for a space where you can stay warm, you can stay out of the elements as much as possible. Sometimes the only place that is like someone's business, a vestibule, a doorway that has an awning, those kinds of things. And so it's really unfortunate when we have to choose between letting a business owner has to choose between letting somebody have that shelter or running their business in a way that makes it feel safe for people who are coming into. And I'm not suggesting that those spaces aren't safe, but if you're not used to seeing homelessness and you're not used to seeing poverty like that, it can feel scary. And so when people have to choose between their livelihood, especially small businesses, or they feel like they have to choose between their livelihood and trying to help someone, it's a really hard decision for people to make. When we have spaces where people can access those services, they can get out of the cold, they can use drugs in spaces that aren't somebody's alley, or again, the entrance to somebody's business because there's an awning, then people don't have to make those choices. They can care about their community and not have to put their livelihood at risk. They don't have to make those choices. When we put money into those kinds of services, we're able to see that kind of safety almost immediately. It doesn't mean that it goes away, though, right? And that's where we need more commitment to longer term solutions, things like equitable healthcare for people. Right now, we're seeing so many people without doctors. I don't have the numbers on it, unfortunately, but I mean, Ford, speaking of, campaigned on getting rid of, hospital, what is it called?
The doorways.
Thank you. Yes. And that's not something that has been addressed. When people are dealing with chronic pain, I mean, we see a lot of people who use opioids, for example, and a lot of the deaths that we see in Ontario actually come from people who are employed in construction and in the construction field. Construction is really hard physically on the body. That creates pain, that creates injuries. And when we're looking at the kind of work that doesn't create stability, that's often seasonal, or that can be gig work, or even if you're connected to, a union or a trade union, something like that, it still doesn't stop your body from deteriorating when you're asking it to do things that are really physically demanding. And when people don't have good time off, when their careers are at risk, then people start using drugs in order to deal with the pain. And if we're not doing anything to address those foundational issues, if we're not creating opportunities for people to healthcare to take care of their bodies, other opportunities for careers once people aren't able to continue, once their bodies are no longer cooperating in the same ways, then we're not actually addressing why people are using drugs, which then often spirals into other things. And then the housing crisis. There's so many people who are experiencing homelessness now that have never experienced homelessness in their life, just simply because we do not have housing for people. And when you're on the streets, people have to find ways to survive. The streets can be really tough. And so unless we're addressing those things at the root cause, in addition to some of those more immediate solutions, and we're going to invest over time for sustainable solutions, we're not going to be able to address these issues. And I think we're going to continue, or people will continue to fall to trying to find these immediate solutions.
Yeah, and just from the Michael's previous point about the George Floyd and the different the police. So in during the Jan 15th discussion at the city hall, Mayor Alex Nuttall actually kind of made a comment, made a joke about that that kind of died down, defund the police, and then also there was one anecdote from Ward 10 Councillor Bryn Hamilton, she said somebody from her ward mentioned that they don't see the police, and and that was given as an example of wanting to have more police. Anything that kind of observation jumps to you, Michael or Sarah, like how that's those kind of comments and observations come up?
Yeah, well, I heard the mayor say that comment. And that's just an example again about how emboldened people like him are right now. They think that they think that opposition to their line of thinking is wavering. It's a game to them in a lot of ways, or a war, either way you want to say. Like they're quite cocky about their beliefs and about how they think that the city should be run. So that just summed up perfectly what the mayor believes and why he believes it. And in terms of comments about people not seeing the police out there, I don't know why you'd want to see police out there. It doesn't make me feel safe when when I see people with bulletproof vests and guns walking around on our streets. Like that's the opposite of safety for me. These are like I've said it a lot, and I said in my deputation last night about the role of policing in our society, right? It protects the status quo. It's kind of it emboldens it, it protects it, it enriches the ruling class. And mayors like Alex Nuttall and councils like Bryn Hamilton are on that side as well. Like the police protect them. They protect their lifestyle. They protect their financial interests. They protect their political philosophies. So to them, the more policing is good because it makes their lives easier. That makes the lives of the people who they represent better. But they talk about safety and how people feel safe, or if there's there's a perception of safety in our city now, and that's only for a certain section of the population, right? When people say, "Are you safe?" It's like, well, who are you talking about, right? And I know Sarah's been great at mentioning this in terms of, you know, sure, some people feel safe, but you know, when you hire more police, you know, have them downtown cracking down on people, it's, you know, those people aren't feeling safe, right? And you know, people, vulnerable people or marginalized people in our community, you know, they're most likely to be victims of crime. And so, you know, to me, you know, that should be the focus, is on how do we make their lives better? How do we make their lives safer? And, you know, Alex Nuttall has no interest in that. Councillor Hamilton has no interest in that, because it really doesn't serve their interests.
Yeah, I think like there's so many pieces to this question. I mean, I think it's really glossing over the amount of work that our community and the police have been doing to reduce the harm that police have been seen to cause. Like we in Barrie, we have not had anything as scandalous and as noteworthy as George Floyd, but we have had our own instances of police violence towards community that have been caught on camera and off camera that have become big issues. And I think that the current police and the previous police chief especially seemed very committed in trying to change some of those cultural pieces. And so I think that, you know, making light of that work and how much has gone into changing some of those structures so that we're not seeing that violence in Barrie, or at least we're not seeing as much of it. It's not as public. I can't say whether or not it's still happening, but at least there's a reduction to what we're publicly seeing. I think that that really glosses over the amount of work that has been done to create those outcomes. I mean, we're not necessarily seeing that in the States. The amount of violence that is happening in the States when it comes to the police is continually increasing. And I would imagine that that's similar in places in Canada as well. And so I think that it's really dismissive and really demoralizing and really devaluing of the work that has gone into trying to create more safety and to change some of those perspectives. And just some of the culture that leads to that violence. So I think that's really disheartening. I also think that, again, and as well, Michael has also spoken to, seeing the police means that there is an issue. The police only respond to something that has happened, right? Even the prevention stuff is a response to what is happening. And so I think that seeing more police is definitely not a marker of a healthier, safe society. I think it's definitely an indication, a visual indication of things that are going wrong. And I think that I agree that safety is complicated. We need to really look at what is safety versus what is comfort. Discomfort can feel like a lack of safety. It can signal to our body that we're not safe. And we can respond in our, you know, our fight and flight. Most people know what that is, but when we feel like we're in danger, our body responds to danger, whether that danger is, you know, an anxious phone call or whether that danger is a lion that's chasing us. The reality is our body doesn't necessarily know. And so we need other cues to let us know what is safe versus what is comfort. And I think that oftentimes we really promote or prioritize some forms of safety and some forms of comfort over other forms of safety. We know that when the police, especially given that my work is with people who use drugs and around drugs in general, we know that when the police are the response to dealing with drugs, that actually creates a lack of safety for everybody in community. When we don't take care of why people are using drugs and supporting people who are using drugs, we see an increase in things like hepatitis C and HIV transmission. That's not a measure of safety, I don't think, for our communities. We see petty crime go up around drugs. So when people are accessing their drugs on the black market, or when there's underground markets for how people are accessing those things versus buying them in, you know, the grocery store, everyone can access, thanks to Doug Ford, we can all access our beer and our alcohol, you know, at the corner store, at the supermarket. But when people have to go underground to do that, it changes the dynamics. It changes the whole economy when it comes to those pieces, and how you are able to access that changes. And so there's a lot more crime around that. Often the price goes up when it comes to drugs in underground markets. And so people have to find ways of making that money, whether that's sex work, whether that's petty crime like theft, those sorts of things, whether that's stealing themselves so that they can support their own habit, or their rent for that matter. All of those things contribute to crime rates, right? And then also when we're making things like being homeless a crime, which we have seen in our municipality, when we're seeing things like panhandling, which, don't get me wrong, a lot of people don't necessarily want to see, because it indicates that we have problems. It indicates that people are suffering. And so when we are making those things illegal because we don't want to see them, that increases the crime rate. Like when we're making that behavior illegal, that increases the crime rate, not because it's harming people. People are already being harmed. People are experiencing harm right now. They're trying to find creative solutions to reduce that harm. But when we're making those activities illegal, that increases the crime rates too. And when we're using that, like when we're looking at safe communities, increasing the rates of crime is not a safe community. It's not creating safety, it's contributing to some of those issues that are then used as examples of why we need more police. When it becomes this cycle of, we're not addressing the problem, so the problem gets worse. So we attempt to address the problem in ways that continue to perpetuate the problem. And so I think that it's really unfortunate that City Council wasn't able to speak to some of those ongoing issues, what safety is for everybody, and look at what safety is for everybody, not just a few people. And also it's very difficult to find rates, but people who experience homelessness often experience a great amount of violence at the hands of other people, including people who are housed. I know that we have had similar cases, maybe not as extreme, but like people who are experiencing homelessness are often targeted by people who really want to hurt people. Like we saw that with Robert Pickton. We see that with a lot of serial killers. And while that may seem extreme, when we're creating a population that we don't see as worthy, then we're also not going to acknowledge their security, their safety, and what we're doing to not support that very real harm that is often directed at people who are experiencing homelessness.
So can you, the Robert Pickton episode, can you just briefly mention either Sarah or Michael, when did this happen, and what was the incident?
Oh my goodness, I'll have to look up the year. Unless you have it, Michael, you probably are more informed. But Robert Pickton was a very famous serial killer out of BC. It was expected that he was an active serial killer and killing people in the downtown east side, specifically people who are engaged in sex work and people who are using drugs. And he was targeting that population specifically because they were often isolated from other parts of community. They were often not seen as truthful. They were often like if they brought issues to the police often disregarded them because they had issues, mental health issues, because they had drug use issues, because they were experiencing homelessness. They were seen as being dramatic, those kinds of things. And that allowed him to, I believe it was over 30 people that they were able to connect to him, but it was expected to be considerably more over a few decades that Robert Pickton was able to kill without coming to the attention of the police. And I want to say that was at the beginning, like the early 2000s when that was happening. I can look up the date shortly. There was also a killer in Toronto whose name is entirely escaping me right now. But that again also.
Are you talking about Bruce MacArthur?
Yes, Bruce MacArthur.
Yeah.
Thank you. And he targeted specifically drug-using population of queer and trans men. because again, when they went to the police with their concerns, when the community went to the police with their concerns, they were often shrugged off as, you know, overreacting, or these people are just transient, or you know, they're liars, they're drug users. It doesn't really, you know, they're not telling the truth anyway. And it allowed him to act with impunity for several years and kill a lot of people, even though the community themselves knew that there was an active serial killer and had been asking the police for help. And so while it seems for like we see this happen all the time, and even if it's not active serial killers, people are often targeted acts of violence, you know, people's encampments being burned down, people being doused with water in the freezing cold. So, you know, knowing that they have nowhere else to go, people are experiencing hypothermia, those kinds of things. And those are very real things that we see in our community in Barrie as well.
Yeah, Michael, do you have anything to add to those that?
No, except to you know, to kind of build on what Sarah was saying in terms of you know, what our society, how our society views others, and what people think of other people who may not kind of fit their mold in terms of what a good citizen or what a good neighbor might be. And you know, it kind of goes in a line when you like if you're increasing the police budget to crack down on people, if you're, you know, if you want to see more police officers out on the street because you want local businesses to feel, you know, to feel like that the city's doing something to support them and to make sure that their customers are safe as they come into their stores. It kind of, you know, it just points to the fact that, you know, those are the people that that our society cares about. You know, those are the people who will benefit from public policy decisions by our politicians. You know, it's not the marginalized people, it's not the vulnerable people that will be protected by these, you know, by these bylaws or by this legislation. And so, you know, when you see these people become victims of crime in the most extreme sense, you know, it does kind of paint a picture in terms of what we value as a society and who we value. And, you know, unfortunately, in our city, you know, based on, you know, the actions of our politicians and our council, you know, and our MPs and our MPPs as well, you know, they don't value people who are living on the streets, who are using drugs, and who are struggling, you know, with poverty, is struggling to find a way through life. I know they're not valued. You know, our city doesn't care about those people, and you know, the actions of our politicians, the actions of our mayor, in terms of their priorities around the budget, kind of just solidifies, you know, that idea to me, anyways.
Yeah, so this just reminds me of, you know, in one of the meetings, you know, I think it was uh no, I'm sure it was Councillor Claire Ripma, and he said of Ward 1, and he said, you know, perception is reality. You know, they were talking about, you know, about the public safety. And so that's, you know, again goes back to the points that, you know, if somebody is, you know, feeling unsafe, that doesn't mean, you know, they are unsafe. So that's you know, oh, I feel unsafe, so, you know, that's the reason I need more police. And then you also touched upon, you know, the policing doesn't necessarily involve, you know, protecting the vulnerable or the minority, as you know, the incidents of Bruce McArthur in Ontario, and then also in, you know, a couple of incidents in Barrie, as far as I know. Is one South Asian family, you know, they were threatened in their own house. They called the police, and, you know, police showed up and, you know, pretty much didn't do anything, didn't follow up with them. They decided to, you know, leave Barrie and move on to the another city. There was another incident where, you know, a garage and car of one of the Indian family was, you know, burned in Barrie, and, you know, I reached out to the to the entire council, including mayor, to the police chief. I haven't heard back from anyone regarding that, regarding what happened, how that was investigated, and even that post came down. It was posted on Barrie Indian Association, and that post was deleted. I reached out to Barrie Indian Association asking, why that post was removed. I haven't heard back, so I'm not sure, why the post was removed. So there are instances like this where minorities do call police, because that's first thing comes to your mind, right? When you are threatened, but if you don't get the response and a proper response from the police about the incidents, but also about the when media follows up versus when we compare, what happened when there was a stabbing of in one of the parks, and there was immediate cry for clearing out the park. Mayor came out, spoke against it, but when it comes to the minority, we haven't seen that kind of reaction from the mayor or city council or from the police. So that's what they feel unsafe, as Michael said. Is kind of, I don't see the police. We need to see police to feel safe, but when it comes to minority, me, other people, they feel unsafe when they when they see the police. I remember few years back, there was a cry from mayor that, oh, we need to have police presence in downtown. And then I was there, and one of the nights there were like police walking on the sidewalk, and they walk in a such a way that you have to get down from the sidewalk to make they don't make the compromise. I know they have to be the vest wearing police. They can't give you the right of the way. They have to be walking in such a way with confidence that then I see, like, I got down from the sidewalk, there were other people got down from the sidewalk to make a space for police. So that's whole dynamic is not concerned. I have police board, as you said, doesn't represent like members are conservative. That's one thing, but again, there are no minorities represented on police board. There are no minorities coming up to the city council speaking against, or even police reaching out to them, as far as I know, and asking them how we can make make the Barrie safe for you. So in terms of like what do you think, you touched upon, both of you touched upon what needs to be done, but in terms of do you in terms of last word, what do you think needs to be done, and do you see the hope? Because last night we have seen uh, during the deputations against in regarding budget, one of the deputations was very kind of that we know, the deputant was saying that we know you are not going to do anything, so we are just going to call them out. But even that that did not like solicit any reaction from the council or any commitment in terms of what they will do in the future.
I would say, it's a tough time we're living in right now, especially in our city. Sometimes it is hard to kind of feel like what you're doing is making a difference, and if it's actually leading towards any type of change. But I believe that that the more you stand up for what is right, the more you speak your mind and let people know how things should be done to make our community better for everybody, that over the long term, it does make a difference. 20 years ago, were people raising their voices as much as we are now, in terms of advocating for encampment residences, or asking for police budgets to be decreased, or the police to be defunded. So there's more of that now, I think, than there ever has been, at least in my lifetime. And, you know, I'm, you know, I feel good about that. And you know, there's lots of, you know, lots of people fighting back against, you know, people like Mayor Nuttall, and other politicians like him. And, you know, whenever I feel like we're not making any change or that we're kind of stuck in the mud, um, you know, I just look at you know, other people, you know, like Sarah and like other people who I've come to know over the past, you know, over the past few years, you know, as we keep fighting for a better city. And it just makes me feel that, you know, as long as we have people out there who are fighting, yeah, it will make a difference. It will move the window. It will have, you know, an effect in terms of what we're discussing and hopefully what is prioritized over the coming years. And that, you know, eventually we're going to win. You know, I don't like to look at it as a wins or losses, but you know, the people we fight against look at it in terms of wins and losses, and you know, they'd love to see us lose when they're winning, and uh, uh,
Oh, you,
I think we'll flip the script there eventually. That you know, we are, you know, provide people, and you know, it helps build a better,
yeah, you're breaking up.
better
Sorry.
community for them.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So Sarah, you know, along with your, you know, maybe closing remarks is like, you know, when we were just discussing before the discussion started, I know you mentioned about, you know, around $75 million from the Ontario government to restore, you know, safety to parks and public spaces. So would you mind just, you know, talk a little bit about that as well in the beginning?
Yeah, sure. So on Monday, I believe it was, the provincial government announced that they would be putting $75.5 million towards safer parks. And so the goal was to increase shelter capacity, I believe it was $50 million would go towards housing. $20 million would go towards shelter capacity, and $5.5 million would go towards the Canadian Ontario Board of, oh my goodness, it's escaping me, but essentially like low income housing, geared to income rents, those kinds of things. And so one of the things, I really hope that that is a starting point for getting serious and investing in some of those resources. $75.5 million is nowhere near what the province needs. I mean, I don't think it's anywhere near what Barrie needs if you think about what it costs to build housing or to refurnish and restructure housing so that we can have enough places for people to live. It also doesn't address why people are, you know, why there isn't housing available. It's not that there are no units. It's that there's no available units, there's no safe units, there's no units that are affordable, those kinds of things. We definitely do need more housing so that we can support all aspects of our community. But it's not, it's definitely 50 million for the entire province is not going to address that. And so that's mostly what we were talking about at the beginning of there. And I think that when it comes to hope, like I do hope that that is what the province and our municipality are going to start prioritizing. And if they don't, I think that we don't necessarily need these things to come from the top in order to do something about it as a community. As Michael was saying, there's quite a few people who are speaking out now about encampment evictions and how harmful and violent and problematic they are, how they go against, you know, people's charter rights. When it comes to Canada's commitment to have housing as a human right. right? Like these are things that regardless of whether or not I can trust that the province and the county or even the country is going to do or commit to these things, I think that we often undervalue and underutilize the amount of power that we as community have. We can create the communities that we want to see. And I think that what we've seen, the cooperative housing that we saw in the 80s came out of the 60s and 70s housing crises that were happening at those times, right? People got together to create solutions for the problems that people were experiencing. And as much as I hate it, and I do not think that anyone is disposable, the fact that we have to go through these hardships, and that there will be people, there will be parts of community, there will be entire communities that are targeted and that are the expense. I think that the more we are all impacted by these issues, we're all being impacted by housing. Like even folks that can afford housing, the ability to afford housing is becoming harder and harder, whether people are experiencing homelessness or not. The more that we're experiencing these things and the more that we can see ourselves in our community around us, the more compassion we have and the more creative solutions, like the more drive we have to create solutions that are going to support all of us. And I think when it comes to safety, especially that we've been talking about a lot tonight, that, the $75.5 million is going to support, that, county and city are, trying to put this money into what they see as creating safety and safe solutions for our community. I think that what we often forget is that a lot of these institutions, or the foundations of these institutions, came up because people were experiencing harms and they created groups to protect and support each other. Communities support communities. We are the best at doing that. We who are experiencing the harms are the ones who can come up with those creative solutions. And I think that as horrendous as it is that we have to be experiencing this again in 2025, it feels like, especially for folks who have been paying attention, that this is something we've already dealt with. These are problems that we've already found solutions to. So it's really unfortunate that we're having to do that. But we have always found creative solutions, and we have always cared for our communities. We have created communities of safety out of our communities and with our communities. And I think that's where the hope for me is. It's not necessarily that somebody is going to make a better solution or create, a better budget that's going to help us. That would be lovely. But the reality is we are going to be forced to create communities that are safe for us and each other, our families, and all of the people in our communities once we start to see our community as part of us. And so I am hopeful, and I see that in community all the time, maybe not in all of the ways, maybe not every single day or in everything that I look at, but I'm seeing it more and more as people are becoming more understanding of the hardships that other people are experiencing because they're starting to experience them too. And so as much as it hurts me, as much as I hate that that's what's going to bring us together, I am also very hopeful that we are going to do that, and that we will be able to overcome this. I just hope that we're able to do it soon, whatever soon means. I hope that we're able to do it with the least loss of life that we can. I hope that we're able to take the examples that we already have and see how we're all intrinsically connected, rather than having to have more George Floyds, more than having to have more Robert Picktons, that we will start to learn from these things, and we will come together to create the safety that we all really want and deserve, every part of our community.
Oh, I think that's a very good note to finish on. So thank you so much, Michael and Sarah, for your time today. Thank you. That was the update from Simcoe Community Media. Thank you for watching.